Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
And welcome to America's Heroes Group. Today is Saturday, September 25th, 2021. My name is Sean Claiborne, National Guard veteran, filling in for host Cliff Kelly and also Dr. Damon Arnold. September is National Suicide Prevention Month and Hispanic Heritage Month. Executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And welcome to the show. And today we have a great show for you. We're going to also honor this month being September National Suicide Month Prevention. And also we're going to have some good information for you as far as legally speaking. So we have someone special on our hotline right now, and that is Stephen J. Seidman, the founding attorney of Seidman Law Offices with over 30 years experience in trial lawyer focused on personal injury. Steve is America's Heroes Group partner, sponsor, and advisory board member. Welcome, Steve J. Seidman. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for having me. How are you today?
Very, very well.
Good. So lots going on here since the last time I was on the show about a month ago. And it's nice to meet you, by the way, Sean. A couple of things have come up this month. One is that there's been some class action suits filed against the military. One was by the Air Force veterans who actually were affected by certain PTSD, which is, of course, the psychological problems that they encountered during their military service. And this actually came up just on September 13th, not that long ago, obviously, where two former Air Force airmen filed a class action lawsuit to actually force the service to review thousands of less than honorable discharges awarded since 9/11 to members with a traumatic brain injury or mental health issue. Now, the reason that this becomes so important is there have been a lot of denials of basic disability and administrative dismissals and even court-martials for people who have had mental PTSD who have come out of the Army. And, of course, when there are discharges that are dishonorable, we all know that affects the ability to get a job. It affects the ability to get certain benefits. So getting a dishonorable discharge is very, kind of sorted on your record. Now, a lot of people have been sort of categorized as been dishonorably discharged because they have mental problems and they were victims of military sexual assault or post-traumatic stress disorder or head injuries. And there was a settlement that was reached a few years ago that said you've got to look at these cases separately, individually, to determine whether or not these mental disabilities are what affected their conduct in the armed forces. And if this settlement said that the Army, for instance, agreed to review all then less than honorable discharges for eligible service members. And of course, there are allegations that they did not. This new lawsuit was brought by the Air Force, an individual who was named Martin Johnson, and he was deployed to Iraq in 2007. He said a car bomb exploded near his base, shaking everything and triggering him into a deep depression. He was sensitive to loud noises and had a lot of relationship issues. Despite the fact that he'd earned multiple awards and accolades, he engaged in minor misconduct. He failed to keep his lawn fully mowed. Remember, that was it. His lawn fully mowed was one of the charges, and he was given a discharge under honorable conditions, but then subsequently could not get his discharge upgraded to where it needs to be.
So, one second, Mr. Seidman. You're saying that this soldier was discharged because he didn't cut his grass.
It was one of the allegations in his less than honorable discharge was that his grass was not mowed appropriately, believe it or not. He had some relationship issues and behavioral problems after his return from combat. And he obviously must have had some other minor misconduct, but one of those minor misconducts was failing to keep his lawn fully mowed.
That's
So
insane.
he was given, this is how picayunish this was. But the allegation really wasn't. It was because he was mentally unstable. And, let's face it, those people sometimes are kind of categorized unfairly. There was another airman who served, and she was raped, airwoman. She was raped during her military service. She's also part of this class action. She's only known as Jane Doe. Of course, after being raped, she later developed post-traumatic stress disorder, and it manifested herself in misconduct, and she was awarded an other than honorable discharge, similarly to the other individual. And she, denied her a host of benefits, medical services, disability compensation, education benefits. And the point here, Sean, is that veterans like these, they agreed to put their country above themselves, and in return, they expected to be taken care of fairly. And sure enough, many of these people develop mental health disabilities or experience mental sexual trauma. And our executive producer, Linda Smith, this is what she's worked so hard for to change. And in fact, things have changed, but all these people have got discharges for less than honorable, such as these two people, because really their mental issues, they're now hopefully going to be reviewed. This class action, which just went into effect a couple weeks ago, will hopefully speak to that. Now, why is this important? Well, we just talked about this as National Suicide Month, and we also should know that we did a show a while ago that the veterans' suicide is among the highest rates of suicide known. And why is it? For many reasons. And this is National Suicide Prevention Month. And in fact, knowing that the suicide rate among veterans is highest or higher than the general public. This month, we have all seen that there's been a pullout in Afghanistan. And New York Times wrote an excellent article this week about the actual trauma caused to people, veterans, because of this pullout. Why? Because they feel that what they did was not worthwhile.
Right. 20 years and not much to show for it afterwards.
Exactly. So now when they go back and they're struggling with the health problems, with trauma, with the feelings of displacement and alienation, all of these things that they're now faced with, why did I do it? What did I do? And that's why individuals who are listening, I believe, need to have get counseling for this type of thing, because this is a major problem.
And on that point, though, Mr. Simon, so we saw the debacle of getting out of Afghanistan. We saw people hanging on to airplanes as they're taking off, people getting run over on the tarmac. So how much preparation have you seen far as returning veterans from such a long and traumatic experience, 20 years of war, and seeing some of the most heart-wrenching and most devastating things where you see families being broken in Afghanistan, you're trying your best to try to make a difference, and then at the end of the day, the regime that you ousted is back in power, meaning the Taliban. So do you see anything happening now with all the hindsight of all the previous conflicts we've been involved in over the last 100 years, or at least since Vietnam even? It's talking about just since Vietnam. Are we doing better as far as getting veterans the support structure they need so when they return home, they have the counseling, they have resources they can turn to talk about their concerns?
In my opinion, no. And I think that this is kind of raw, right? Because this withdrawal just occurred. But in my opinion, I'm not seeing it. What I did see this week, interestingly, was there's a potential GI Bill for Afghan allies, which, there were translators who helped us. We all heard about these people. These were folks who helped the armed services in Afghanistan when there was this war going on, and they helped us, and then they were sort of left, and now some of them are out of the country. So we've seen some type of humanitarian, military, and development organizations who want access to training and education for those folks, and that's a good thing. But what I'm not seeing is the use of the GI Bill and other instrumentalities over the last several weeks in reintegrating American service members returning from war and helping them usher into this era. And I'm a little concerned about it. I think that the VA is really is maybe not set up for it. I think that has to be a push during the next weeks in a major way to see that people are going to get what they need done here. And that is the counseling, the psychological help, and all of these things. Many of these people have physical ailments. They were exposed to burn pits, and we'll talk about burn pits in a moment. But burn pits are where they threw every toxin. And even at the end of this occupation, they were throwing military parts. They were burning stuff so that the Taliban couldn't get a hold of it, right? But where does the toxic fumes go to? It goes in the atmosphere, which these people breathe,
right.
And it causes cancers. And we'll get into an example in a moment. And even President Biden, I think, attributes the death of his son Beau to the toxic burn pits. So we have a bunch of stuff that we're in the throes of maybe being able to help these people come home, and veterans who are faced now with this kind of a feeling, and what have we done? What did we do this for? All this is for naught. And wait, this isn't an imaginary thing. And if people could look at the New York Times article that was written this week on it, it's a very excellent article. And it talks about how there are so many people going through so many problems as a result of the invisible issues, the struggles that they're having internally. And especially when we have suicide at the rate we do with veterans, we don't need any more, not one more. And I think that in answer to your question, no, there isn't, in my opinion, been a better or improved way to do this.
That's depressing. Now, legally speaking, what's the remedy for people, these veterans that are having lawsuits, some of the service members are discharged? What's the remedy for them? Is there monetary awards that could be handed to these people? Is it just about getting aid or help or counseling?
Yes, and in the last couple shows, we've been talking a little bit about disability and military disability and veterans disability programs that allow, for instance, burn pit compensation for psychological, for PTSD, for all of those things. And what we've noticed, and Dr. Arnold and I were talking about it, and actually Yale Law School brought a class action for it as well. And by the way, this last class action with Air Force veterans was also brought by Yale Law School and their legal clinic. They do an excellent job. But the discrimination on these disability claims between the people of color and others, and it was Dr. Arnold's contention, and it actually was borne out in this class action suit, that the statistics show that people of color get treated less favorably than people who aren't of color for disability consideration, meaning getting disability benefits. So in answer to your questions, there are no lawsuits per se you could bring against the military if you're a military person because of something called the Ferris Doctrine. But you could certainly get disability compensation through these various methods that the Veterans Administration allows you to. And people do this for hearing loss, and we've talked about the earplug debacle. So there are disability. Now, there was one as we're talking about the burn pit litigation, if you're in the VA, Sean, and you get malpracticed upon, okay, and malpractice, and that's what we do as a law firm, the federal government, if the thing is brought appropriately, the lawsuit, the claims, and everything else, if you could prove that there was malpractice, then you would be able to recover monetary compensation for pain and suffering, for loss of a normal life, and for all those terrible things you get. Now, in Vermont, the Vermont federal judges this week, on Monday, approved a $3 million settlement for a veteran with limited life left and his family, resolving a medical malpractice claim that the VA hospital failed to diagnose the shoulder's colon cancer caused by his breathing burn pit fumes during his tours in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Wow.
So here was an individual that he went to the VA to get treated at the hospital for cancer, colon cancer, that was related by the experts to be caused by burn pits, and they dropped the ball to VA. So he's getting a $3 million settlement. And so we see things like that in terms of compensation if you're malpracticed upon. Your question, though, was for those who just suffer the everyday terrible things that occur, this invisible damages at war. What they can do, their only remedies are to go to the VA to get the help that they can psychologically, psychiatrically, and to be aggressive doing that. This counseling is very important. This suicide issue has become a major problem. It has been one for a while, but it's a major problem. Now, we also see, that you might have remembered that Navy crash suit, which happened recently outside of Japanese waters. You'll recall there were people who died on that, and this week the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is a court of appeals not too far from us, said that they heard argument of whether or not they would allow these cases of those people who died in that crash to be heard in the United States or in Japan. Because when you're in the military, and we've talked about this before in other shows, you give away a lot of rights. You give away most of your legal rights. And for the longest time, you couldn't sue for malpractice if you were in the hospitals and if caused by injuries of war, if it was a government hospital, because of what we call the Ferris Doctrine. That changed during the last 2 years, as has other things. But there are a lot of immunities that the government has established for themselves. And hopefully, as we go forward, we'll be able to open up things for military individuals to do and get more than what they are right now. So,
and recently there was the Biden administration, under the VA administration, under the Biden administration, talked about and announced that they would start looking at veterans who had less than honorable discharges and getting them treatment or getting them benefits and evaluating what types of benefits they could be eligible for despite their less than honorable discharge. How is that? How far-reaching do you think that will be? And then also, will that change the way that veterans are treated and service members are treated? Do you see any long impacts with that announcement?
Yes, and in fact, I think it stems, quite frankly, this had been given lip service a while ago, and then the Biden administration came in. When Chuck Hagel was the defense secretary, he said, I'm going to make this happen, where less than honorable discharge people who have mental disabilities or mental issues get reviewed. That was the settlement that led to the class action I just talked about. So you would like to see it work, but that's a little lip service right now, because why else would a class action suit need to be brought if it was actually being done according to what you had heard this week, and we all heard. But, unfortunately, Martin Johnson and Jane Doe, those U.S. Air Force veterans, they had to file a class action. That was filed on September 13th. So what it leads me to believe is that although it sounds good, it's not happening appropriately. And that's why the need for this lawsuit came about. While we're on the subject of this, we found out just this week that LGBTQ veterans who were discharged dishonorable for sexual orientation are now going to get or be reviewed because, believe it or not, we had the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. Right. And in 1993, they said, hey, if you ask, you could tell, but you better not say that you're LGBT, because if you are, you're going to get discharged. So basically, these individuals were discharged dishonorably, less than honorable, and they gave away life-saving benefits like health care, pensions, housing assistance, just because they might have violated the Don't Ask, Don't Tell because of who they were. So on the 10th anniversary of the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, there was a class action, actually a statement that from the military that they're going to look into this, because in order to re-enlist in the military and access medical care, compensation, the pension, education, home loan, insurance benefits, right, you have to have honorable discharge. You can't have less than honorable discharges. And believe it or not, those folks who had those issues, those that came out before, they discriminated against, and they're ineligible for benefit. Mm-hmm. So the VA said in a statement this week, it hopes that this policy statement that says that we are now going to look at every one of these cases, it hopes that people are now going to come out and complain about their less than dishonorable discharge. So I think we're seeing some stuff during this administration, Sean, that hopefully is going to make a difference. And I know we're running out of time, so I want to open it up to questions if you have them.
Well, yes. One of the things that I always struggle with when it comes to VA, especially how veterans and how people in the military are treated when it comes to legal issues, because we talked about this once before years ago, and one thing you mentioned that it's not an issue of money. If it's not an issue of money, then you would think that it's an issue of being embarrassed, possibly, maybe the legal ramifications of what you're liable for if you have people that get hurt in the military or raped in the military, and then all of a sudden can't get benefits. Why then, that being said, why not go ahead and take care of these veterans versus facing all the legal ramifications that will come from attorneys representing veterans for things that were egregious, things that obviously should not have happened to them?
You would think that makes common sense and good sense, but we all know about politics, right? And how the sounding points are for these politicians who like to espouse ridiculous views. Hopefully this administration will see changes. It's been slow, but we've seen them.
Well, thank you, Mr. Seidman. I appreciate your time. We are out of time now. You are listening to our partner and sponsor, advisory board member of America's Heroes Group, Mr. Stephen J. Seidman. America's Heroes Group, Roundtable, Legally Speaking. We are going to be back in a minute. Stay tuned.